Okay, Daniel Rowe here again. In this video, I'm going to cover the Replicator workspace, how I've set up this workspace, and how to use the Replicator and build this chart, the target chart on the right that I have the Replicator on, how to build this from scratch, and how to set up the Replicator accordingly for copying the indicators from a higher time frame to that chart of a faster time frame. So in this case, copying the indicators on the weekly chart to the daily chart. And before we get into that, let me just show you a couple of things about setting up NinjaTrader to prevent you from deleting the charts by accident, and also a little bit about how the Replicator works. But before we get into that, let me show you at least one trick to help prevent you from deleting the charts by accident and having to go and copy the backup workspace, in case you mess up a chart or delete a chart by accident. So to prevent that, go to the NinjaTrader Control Center, select Tools, Options, and just make sure that you check this Confirm on window or tab close. Make sure that's checked. It's in general, so that when you accidentally delete a chart, if you're trying to maximize and you hit that X, it will at least throw this pop-up window first, and you can then click No. Before I forget, if you do happen to delete one of these charts, say I deleted this one, I can rebuild it by creating a new weekly chart of Apple. And I set it to weekly and daily because most people will at least have access to daily data for free from Kinetic, the Kinetic end of day data feed. So you can build a new chart and apply the Replicator source chart template, but you'll notice that if you try to apply it from here, you won't see it. And that's because I put all of the different chart templates for the different tools that we have within folders in the chart templates folder. Okay, so you first have to build the chart. You can see this is my default chart template for some reason, I think for testing the divergence analyst. Right click on the chart, select templates, load, and then you'll see the Replicator folder. Double click on that, and here you have source and target. The source is the weekly chart, the target is the daily chart where the readers are located. So double click on source. That builds out the proper settings for this particular workspace, and then you can recalculate the readers, recalculate all, and they'll sync back up. You see? So I just wanted to show you that before moving on. Okay. And one other thing, if you wanted to change the color of these charts to match those of mine, I've set the skin here to, slate light. I think by default it's set to dark, and that just, I don't know, it looks a little bit funny with these charcoal blackish backgrounds. So yeah, other than that, let's get right into it. When you start up NinjaTrader and open up this workspace, this is the TTP Replicator workspace. It's very simple. I'm just simply showing you one example of how to copy the indicators from a higher time frame to a lower time frame. But when you open it, you'll also see the Reader Manager window open up. And this, let me just cover a little bit about this. The reader system, which we have readers for the volume analyst, divergence analyst, and then the Replicator, which can copy, not just the volume analyst reader, which copies only the volume analyst, or the divergence analyst reader, which copies only the divergence analyst signals. The Replicator can copy any indicator that has plots and or data series. And the Reader Manager is kind of the central governor, if you will, of the reader system. The toolbar also has readers, but because the toolbar is an add-on, the readers for the toolbar function quite a bit differently than do the Replicator or volume analyst or divergence analyst readers. So quite a bit of difference between the two, but nonetheless, the reader manager governs all of the reader instances. And just starting from the top, you'll see that each reader instance is first of all connected to the workspace name, and secondarily connected to the source chart tag. If you own the toolbar, then that source chart tag will be at the top of the properties of the actual toolbar indicator. I know that those of you who just own the Replicator don't have the toolbar, obviously, but just to show you, that source chart tag is the same, if you don't have the toolbar, is the same as this source tagger indicator property here. Source chart tag for readers, and then in the toolbar it's the same thing. So we added this to the toolbar so that, you know, for the master suite workspaces, for the toolbar workspaces, you wouldn't have to add this kind of redundant indicator and label the chart name here. So for every chart that you want to read or copy the values from, you need to add this source chart tagger or the toolbar, and you must name that chart. So this is the source chart. Source chart is the chart that you're copying from, and the chart that you're copying to is the target, or the reader location, as we call it in the reader manager. Okay, the source is always the chart you're copying from, and the target, or the chart where the reader is located, is the reader location chart or the target chart. And you have all these different columns that you can turn on. The reader label is simply the name of the reader. In this case it's the Replicator, but I have deleted those labels to give a nice clean chart without a lot of text, and I just like my charts as clean as possible. I've even set the line that divides the panels to the same color as the background of the chart. And if you don't like that, obviously you can go and select the properties, right click on the chart, select properties, and you can change that color, which is panel splitter color. So I've set that to the same exact color as that of the background of the chart. So you could change that to whatever, and then see that little line that divides the panels if you so choose. Now, just to go through some of these properties here, again, each reader instance is connected to both the name of the workspace and the source chart tag. The reader location is the chart on which the reader lies, in this case the Replicator, and the source link is the chart being read. It's the source chart. Okay. Custom tag is just something you can add to name, for instance, what indicator you're reading. So I've got one for the RSI, one for the SMA, and then one for the Keltner channel. RSI is the one on the bottom, which is actually our universal oscillator. You could turn this into, I think, one of 20 different oscillators, and then set different average types. You could basically build your own oscillator if you want with this universal oscillator, but I've got it set to the RSI for right now. And then obviously the Keltner channel is that 3-plot channel, and this is an SMA 200. Let's start from the top of the properties within the replicators, and then I'll remove them and rebuild this chart from scratch so you can see how I do it. Alright, the first one is reading the Keltner channel from the weekly chart on the left, plotting it on the daily chart on the right. So number one, I've set the workspace name, and if I had two workspaces open, you would see both of their names here, and then you would select the appropriate name to match that of the workspace you're working and copying the indicators from. Now you could potentially copy indicators from a different workspace onto a chart on another workspace if you wanted to. That's fine, you can do that, but in this example I'm simply copying from the chart on the left to the chart on the right. So I would select the name, And then if I had multiple charts open and I had a label in the field for the source chart tagger indicator, you would see all of the available charts with a tag in this drop-down list, and then you would select the appropriate chart as the source chart that you're copying from. And then you can see all of the indicators from that chart. So these are all of the indicators from the weekly chart that I've tagged with the name source. And then here you have data series 1, data series 2. Now you just have to make sure that you have at least one of the plots selected in this first source data series property. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to copy any of the plots. So you have to select at least one. And if it's an indicator that has a data series for signals, like it gives a +1 for a long, -1 for a short, and you want to simply plot that data series, draw that data series, then you would select that data series here. And if you have one plot for long, one plot for short, you could set the long plot in the first one and the short plot in the bottom one, however you want to set that up. But if you're copying plots, and in this case we're copying the 3 plots, the upper, the mid band or the midline, and the lower of the Keltner channel, you have to define the number of plots here. And if you don't set that number to the exact value of plots or higher, it won't copy the indicator at all. Okay? So in this case we have 3 plots, and I need to set this to at least a value of 3. You could set it higher, it doesn't really matter, but you need to set it to at least the minimum number of plots. Now set non-signal values to 0. That's for a data series that again is setting longs and shorts, longs to one value or shorts to another value, or maybe it's a data series that is simply giving you a signal, not necessarily long or short, but just 1, 2, 3, 4, for volume signals or whatever it may be. And within Blackbird or Bloodhound, you need non-signal bars to not be set to null, but actually be set to 0. You could enable that, but it's not necessary in the case of copying plots. Now, calculate after template ID. This is purely for Bloodhound. If you're copying the signals from Bloodhound into, say, Blackbird, a strategy builder, and you need this replicator within the strategy to be calculated after Bloodhound, then you would simply set the name of that Bloodhound template here. And this would be sure to calculate this replicator instance after that Bloodhound template. But that's rarely to be used. It's really not even necessary unless you have a really massive Bloodhound template that takes a very long time to calculate. So this is not really a property that you need to worry about very much. The next one, multiple source values policy. This is set to extreme by default, and this is for a data series that maybe it has 4 values, 1 for one signal, 2 for the next, 3 for the next, and then 4 for the final signal. And they're in like strength of signal. So it could be potentially set to 2, 3, 4, back to 3, back to 2, back to 4, all within the same bar. If you wanted to hold on to the highest or the most extreme value for that bar and save it and store it for that bar, cache it, then you would set it to extreme. So if at any point within a data series for a given bar, if it's set to 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 2, 1, back to 4, whatever, and it ends on, say, 1, if at any point it got to 4, and that's the most extreme value, it would save 4 as the set value for that bar. Or if 3 was the most extreme value, it would save and store 3 as the set value for that bar. So this is going to make sure that the most extreme value that is set at any given point within that one signal bar is stored and saved and set as the final signal for that bar. Okay, so it stores the most extreme value. If you want to copy the last plot value, for a plotted indicator like the Keltner channel, SMA, RSI, whatever, and you want to make sure that you have the very last calculated value, you would set it to last. If you want to round that value to the closest tick value, price value, you would use last rounded to price. But I'm going to set it to last as I'm copying just a standard average type indicator. And then for the signal parameters, the extender, I'll get into this in another video, but this is for manipulating the output of data series that set bars to particular values for signals, like the volume analyst does. Churn bar can be a 4, extreme churn 5, any type of data series that sets a signal value. And you want to manipulate that output and extend it a certain number of bars based on the bar count on the reader chart or the source chart, and then you want to reset based on opposite signal or any signal, same side signal, no signal, similar to what we have within Bloodhound's signal extender, or you want to reset after a given time. You can manipulate those values here. This is simply for saving the name of a template. Once you have it set up the way that you want it, you can type the name here and then save it, and then you can also load templates if you have any saved. Now this is very important, display mode, source parameters. So because we're copying the plots from an indicator, we're not going to leave it set to show selected data series, which is how it's set by default, and then it colors that plot red, whatever the copied data series may be that's set here in the source data series property. But because we're copying plots, 3 plots, we want to show plots. And I don't need to show both because there is no other data series that has a different value for a signal type data series. It's the same exact value as one of the other plots. So I just set it to show plots. Now this, the calculate mode, this is important. You want the reader, the replicator, to be set to calculate using the same method as the copied indicator or the source indicator. So because all of these indicators are set to calculate on price change, all of these replicators are also set to calculate on price change. Okay, and you want the maximum bars back to be set to infinite. Replicator will always be set to infinite, except in strategy instances, you have to define that it be set to infinite. So if you're calling this in a strategy, you need to make sure to define it to be set to infinite, because I think within a strategy it defaults somehow to 256. So be mindful of that if you are using this within a strategy. But likewise, you also want to match the source indicator to a maximum look back of infinite bars instead of the default 256 for most of NinjaTrader's indicators. And then finally the panel, it wants to draw on a new subpanel by default. And obviously if you're copying indicators from the price panel of the source chart, then you would set this to same as input series to display it on the same panel as the price bars. So the Keltner channel, same as input series, SMA, same as input series, and then finally the RSI panel 2. Okay, so that's it. So now I'm just going to remove these, and then I'll show you building this from scratch. Add 3. The first 2 will go on the same panel as the input series, and then the bottom one to match the RSI will go on a new panel. And then I remove the label just to have a nice clean chart. And then as each of the indicators are set to calculate on price change, I also set the replicators to calculate on price change. In display mode, be sure to set that to show plots when you're copying the plots from an indicator. All right, and now we can go to the top and work our way down. So first of all, the workspace, the source chart tag, this chart is named source, and then the indicator. Number 1 will be the Keltner channel. Data series could be any of them. I'll set it to value. Data series 2, none. We're not really worried about those. We just want to copy the plots, but you have to set something. Again, remember that, set something in this source data series. And then the number of plots. must be the minimum number of plots or larger, since we're copying 3 plots from the Keltner channel. 3. And because it's an average, I set it to last. It's not a signal data series. We're not extending or manipulating the output in any way. And that's good for that one. So now the SMA, source workspace is replicator, source chart tag is source, SMA, data series is just the value, none for the secondary data series. Number of plots is 1. And again, it's an average, so I set it to last. We don't need to displace it. I didn't cover this, but that's for, say I'm copying the signal from a 5-minute chart onto a 1-minute chart, and I'm copying a signal data series that's set to 1 for long, -1 for short, whatever. But the indicator that I'm copying cannot begin to calculate the signal until half of that 5-minute bar is complete. Now this is really only used for the volume analyst that I know of, unless somebody's built other indicators like this. But the volume analyst, you can determine at what point within a bar how much percentage of that bar must have passed, whether it's a time-based bar. If it's 5 minutes, you could set it to 50%, which would mean 2.5 minutes of that bar must have transpired before it begins to calculate signals. Or with a tick chart, if it's 1,000 tick and you set it to 50%, it wouldn't be able to calculate signals until after 500 ticks have transpired. You could set this to match whatever setting you had in the volume analyst, just to give you an idea of that briefly. The volume analyst is set to calculate after n%. And I usually set it to 75 or 60. You could set it to 50. You could set it to 90, and then it couldn't calculate, wouldn't begin to calculate until after 90% of the bar had passed also. But I don't really know of any other indicators that are built that way, so this is not a common property that you would have to worry about. But this instance is copying the RSI, which is here, RSI gapless, from the universal oscillator. And I'll just set that to value, none. And then it's copying 1, 2 plots. And then it has these lines as well, but they're basically drawing objects. They're not plots. So lines are not plots. Averages are plots. Okay, so lines are horizontal, value-based lines, drawing objects. Replicator doesn't copy those because they don't have a data series associated with them or a plot associated with them. So it really only has 2 plots. Technically it has 3, the difference, but I think that's disabled when it's set to 0. Let's see. I'll set this to last. I might have to set it to 3. Yeah, I do, because there is a 3rd plot which draws as bars the width or the distance between the 2 lines. So that's 3, and now it plots, you see? So that's very important to remember. And now we're good to go. So if I wanted to draw those lines, I would just simply add them. I'll turn snap mode off, set it to disabled, and then I would draw horizontal lines, one at 70, 70, and then copy it, paste it, 2 of them, the other one's at 30, one is a midline, whoop, I moved the wrong one, 70, so you can double click on it or select it and right click and select properties. This one would be 50. I'll set this to like a silver width of 1 dotted line, and then I'll set this one to 30, and we're good to go. So now it's copying the exact price historically, but because there are 5 daily bars per week, you'll see this kind of stair step for the historical bars. And then as long as it's set to calculate on price change or on each tick, all of the values calculated thereafter will actually be smooth, and they'll update and save whatever value it was set to in real time for each of the daily bars. So, from this point on, if I let it run for the next 30, 40 bars, the output thereafter, after now, would be smooth. And then if I were to come over here and recalculate, then it would recalculate the historical bars, and then it would draw in this kind of stair-step fashion, which is to say 1 value per week, which is 1 value per 5 daily bars. And then I also set a custom tag just to quickly identify the instance of the replicator within the reader manager. So this one is copying the Keltner channel. I just name it Keltner channel here. Apply and recalculate. This one is copying the RSI. Apply and recalculate. And this one is copying the SMA. The template tag I set for all of the replicator reader instances within a given Bloodhound template, just to be able to filter and sort all of the instances within a particular Bloodhound template here. So you can filter those. For instance, it can filter anything within whatever columns you have visible. So if you want to eliminate some of these, don't need the template tag, and I were to set it to SMA and filter, you see. So that's how the filter works, and then you have to clear it to get everything back. And that's it. It's a very advanced tool. I mean, it's a massive, massive system to be able to do this properly, but it's pretty ingenious the way this has been built out. Anyway, it does exactly what it's intended to do. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to write into support and we'll help you out. All right, thank you very much.